In the limiting reagent experiment, we will be using a balance that records masses to 3 decimal places. If you're having trouble seeing the decimal place on the balance, interpret the numbers to mean that the last 3 are the numbers after the decimal place and any other numbers are before.
This is going to be trial 1. I've got a clean, dry, empty beaker, and I am putting it on the balance. Balance has been tared. Now, record the mass of the empty beaker. All right, I'm going to tare the beaker, and I'm going to add 10 milliliters of purified water. Record the mass of the water. Now, I'm going to tare the beaker in the water, and I'm going to add sodium bicarbonate to the beaker. I'm going to add between 1 to 2 grams. Record the mass of the sodium bicarbonate in your notebook. I'm going to remove the beaker and place it on the table so that I can weigh out some citric acid. I'm going to tare the balance before putting the weigh boat on. I'm going to put the weigh boat on the balance. And I'm going to measure between 1 and 2 grams of citric acid. Record the mass of the weigh boat with the citric acid in your notebook. I'm going to add the citric acid to the beaker. Record your observations. While the reaction is happening, I'm going to tare the balance and weigh the weigh boat that I had the citric acid on. Record the mass of the dirty weigh boat. This should have a little bit of citric acid stuck to it. Subtract the mass of the dirty weigh boat from the mass you recorded of the weigh boat with the citric acid to determine the total amount of citric acid added to the beaker. I'm going to swirl this until the reaction is complete. I will know the reaction is complete when no more bubbles are forming. Recall that for this reaction, one of the products is a gas that causes the bubbles, carbon dioxide. So our reaction is still going. We're still getting bubbles. There are still bubbles in the beaker. I'm going to keep swirling until there are no more bubbles. I'm tapping the beaker on the bench to remove any bubbles that are still in the liquid. We still have some reaction going. There are no more bubbles in the solution. I'm now going to weigh the beaker with its contents. I've tared the balance. I'm going to record the beaker and its contents. That is the end of trial 1. I'm now going to test my hypothesis that sodium bicarbonate was the limiting reactant in trial 1 by adding more sodium bicarbonate. If it was the limiting reactant, I should see more reaction happening when I add more sodium bicarbonate. So I'm going to add it. And what do you see? What can you conclude about whether sodium bicarbonate was in fact the limiting reactant? I'm now going to proceed to trial 2. I have another clean, dry beaker and a tared balance. I'm going to put the beaker on the balance, and I'm going to tare the beaker. I'm going to add 10 milliliters of purified water. Record the mass of the water. I'm going to tare the balance with the beaker and the water on it, and I'm going to add between 1 and 2 grams of sodium bicarbonate to the beaker. Record the mass in your notebook. I'm going to remove the beaker with the sodium bicarbonate in it, and I'm going to put an empty weigh boat, a clean empty weigh boat, on the balance. I'm going to tare the balance. I'm going to put a clean empty weigh boat on the balance, and I'm going to add between 1 and 2 grams of citric acid. Record the mass of the whey boat and the citric acid in your notebook. Going to add the citric acid to the water and the sodium bicarbonate in the beaker. Record your observations in your notebook. I have a tiered balance. I'm going to weigh the dirty whey boat on the balance to determine exactly how much citric acid was added. Record the mass of the dirty whey boat. Subtract this from the mass of the whey boat with the citric acid in it to determine the exact amount of citric acid that was added to the beaker. I'm going to swirl and tap the beaker on the bench until no more reaction is happening, until there are no more gas bubbles. I've waited a long time for the reaction to proceed, and I no longer see any bubbles. The solution is somewhat cloudy still. That's just one of the chemicals not fully dissolving, but I'm no longer seeing any bubbles, so the reaction is complete. I'm now going to take my tiered balance and I'm going to weigh my beaker with the reaction mixture. Record the mass of the products that are left in the beaker in your lab notebook. I'm going to do one final confirmation experiment. This time, I am going to assume that citric acid was the limiting reactant and that there is still remaining sodium bicarbonate that has not reacted in my beaker. To confirm that I'm correct, I'm going to add some more citric acid and look for signs of a reaction.